Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this event, Farming with Nature, Regeneration, Livelihoods, and the New Social Contract for Europe's Farmers and Peasants. We're very happy to have you here with us today. As you might have noticed, the event is being recorded. So if you do not want to be appearing on our recording, please turn off your camera. My name is Anastasia Oprea. I'm a campaign and project officer for Communities for Future for Local Green Deals. Communities for Local Green Deals, which is the project within which this event is taking place. I will be your host today, and I would like to also mention the team, the ECOLISE team, which made this event possible, namely Enric Cachetas, who is doing our event management and technical support, Pauline Tan and Carmen Contreras for communication, and of course, our project manager and policy lead from ECOLISE, Caterina Boyanis. During today's event, we will start by contextualizing the topic with a very short presentation that I will be sharing soon. I hope I can stop this beeping. So I will be contextualizing the topic with a short presentation. We will then go into the practice sharing section with Dara Kasey, Matt Swarbrik, and Anatol Albin. After which we will have a very interesting roundtable sharing solutions, experiences, and a view for the future regarding how we can further cultivate community by scaling local wisdom into a regenerative European social contract. I would like to kindly ask you, if possible, to change your name or the name that appears on the screen to your name, organization, and country. This helps us facilitate connections, and it might help you identify people you would like to keep in touch after this. If you have any questions at any moment during this event, you can write them in the chat, or in certain moments, for example, after the presentation, the practice sharing, and during the roundtable, you will also be able to raise your hand and ask your questions directly. And with that said, I will start my presentation to have a clearer context of what we're doing here today. It's okay, right, Enrico?
All set.
Thank you. Let me just move a bit here. Okay, so as I was saying, this event is part of an advocacy campaign that ECOLISE is running, titled Communities for Future, Good Food for All, which is part of the SERVE project, Communities for Local Green Deals, which is coming to an end at the end of May. To contextualize the topic of the event today, I would like to talk to you a bit about the Farming with Nature for Good Food for All. And give you a bit more context about our campaign. Our campaign is based on the ECOLISE policy position paper, Reclaiming the Future of Food, Communities, Pathways to Resilience, Justice and Regeneration, which I invite you all to read. And if you'd like to engage with our processes, also contact us at ECOLISE. The objectives of this campaign were to mobilize community-led initiatives, civil society networks, and allies around our shared vision for just and sustainable food systems in Europe. This campaign also builds momentum around the Right to Food European Citizens Initiative, and thus invites communities across Europe to affirm food as a collective and political responsibility. This is a very important ongoing initiative that I invite you all to also view and sign, as it aims to transform how we look at food and also to coagulate bigger alliances around food in Europe and just food systems. What the campaign does is connect lived community practices with European policy debates, as we will do today, advance concrete recommendations that strengthen local and regional food systems. Our campaign also supports agroecological, inclusive, and regenerative practices. And very importantly, through this campaign and the alliances that we're building, we want to have food recognized as a human right rather than a commodity. Our previous events in the campaign have been focused on food democracy in practice, commons governance, bi-regional partnerships, and the Right to Food European Citizens Initiative. The second one was focused on women, food, and communities, and the pathways towards sustainability this can bring. This event also marked the International Year of the Women Farmer, which is happening in 2026. And the third event focused on reclaiming local food economies, namely by having the community wealth as alternative, increasing territorial residence, and overall thinking about the future of food through an economic lens. You can watch the full recordings on YouTube if you're interested. And regarding our topic today, farming with nature, regeneration livelihoods, and the new social contract for Europe's farmers and peasants, of course, the question that might come to mind is why do we need to discuss this topic? Mainly because across Europe, the social contract governing agriculture is under strain. We know that farmers and peasants are increasingly positioned at the forefront of ecological stewardship. However, they are not necessarily recognized as such, which means that the current food systems fail to provide them the economic security or institutional support needed for them to thrive, which in turn means that the quality of the food we get is not the one that we would like. The production of food is not as sustainable as it could be. And also, very importantly, it puts into question the survival of rural communities and of the peasant life. So what we aim to do here today is to take agroecology and regenerative agricultural practices as drivers of both social and ecological regeneration. How we are going to do this is by recognizing and promoting community-led practices which enact an agriculture that restores soil health, nature biodiversity, while also securing dignified livelihoods for all. So taking them together. To contextualize this in the policy positioning, from a policy positioning perspective in ECOLISE, I would like to mention two policy recommendations from our policy positioning paper, Reclaiming the Future of Food, namely Policy Recommendation 3, which is about enabling a transition to a just and resilient agricultural and food paradigm, particularly by investing in and scaling farmer-led agroecological and regenerative practices, which have the highest environmental and social impact. The second policy recommendation that I would like to bring to your attention is to make the transition to a regenerative paradigm viable and attractive for all. So I invite you again to read the paper and see more about the rest of the policy recommendations as well. And to bridge with today's discussion. These are some of the measures that can be found in our policy paper regarding how to bring about these policy recommendations into practice and into action. Namely, to focus on enabling a framework for the scaling of community-centered agroecology and regenerative farming, improve access to land, safeguard seeds, and breed biodiversity, but also create dedicated funding such as an agroecological transition fund, acknowledge and reward social and environmental value of nature-positive food systems, and of course, guarantee the long-term viability of this transition. So we will hear more about some of these today from our speakers. And I also invite you to stay connected with ECOLISE on our social media platforms and on our website. I will stop sharing now, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Okay, I see there that you started introducing yourself on the chat. Thank you very much for that. If there's anyone else who would like to write their name and their organization, that would be great. Enrique sharing the links that I'm mentioning. And if there are no questions at this point, I would like to move on and invite our practice sharers to tell us a bit more about their good practices that we can take as examples. The practice sharers today are Dara Kassei from Cat Farm in France, Mats Farbrig from Henban Permaculture in the UK, and Anatol Albin from Garden of Moldova in the Republic of Moldova. I will first give a short introduction about Dara, who has been studying and practicing regenerative agriculture since 2017. He spent time with indigenous farmers practicing ancestral methods in Mexico, Morocco, and northern Thailand, which he combines with modern methodologies learned at a research center for syntropic agriculture in Brazil. And today he puts these learnings into practice in the Eco Village and School for Regenerative Culture Cat Farm Education. Welcome, Dara. Thank you very much for joining us today. We had him with us just a moment ago.
Is Johnny again?
Oh, yes. So, Dara, if you're ready to tell us a bit more about syntropic agriculture at the cat farm, it would be lovely.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, I was having some technical problems during the introduction, but yes, so we are here in Cat Farm in the south of France, close to the city of Montpellier, in Mediterranean zone, and we have been practicing agroforestry here since the last 2 years. It's syntropic agroforestry, so before arriving in Cat Farm, I study in Brazil also, and with other people, syntropic agriculturalists. And here, we have 4 aims in our garden. The first aim is to adapt syntropic agriculture to Mediterranean climate, because it was originally developed in a subtropical climate in Brazil. So even though a lot of the principles or ways of understanding are the same, we have to understand a lot how we can adapt these principles to Mediterranean climate. I also see here that there is people from Terra Syntropica and Southern Lights, which I know are also doing amazing work adapting syntropic to the Mediterranean region. So I'm very happy to see that they're present here also. Yeah, so there's this work of developing syntropic agriculture in this climate in terms of the plant species used, especially, and in terms of, yeah, all the local techniques. What we're also aiming to do, and this is something that goes beyond just what's happening on the land, is develop commercial models. So, yeah, that we can create models, economic models that other farmers can replicate so that, yeah, so that this form of agriculture is not just good for the land, but it's also good for local farmers. I noticed a question there asking me to explain what is syntropic agriculture. Unfortunately, I only have 5 minutes, and it's something which, yeah, I think requires a bit of explanation. And maybe the person interested, we can connect later, or also, yeah, after this. So along with developing commercial models and doing research for adapting syntropic to Mediterranean, we are also a center for education. That's something we've been doing in Cat Farm for a long time. Education on various topics, community living, natural building, and syntropic agriculture is a big reason. Also, people come to learn here, also with the local community. We organize tree planting days, get many people interested. And we notice, yeah, in the local community, there is big interest in different ways of doing agriculture. Yeah, not only for the nature, but also because here in the Mediterranean and in this part of France, the main form of agriculture is viticulture, wine, the growth of wine, which is now entering into crisis. The wine industry here, people drink less wine, and the wine plantations are doing worse because of climate change. So yeah, the local people also recognize a big need for developing new ways of farming and support us a lot. Yeah, in our work. Yeah, so this is a little introduction. There's a lot more that I could say, and people who are interested more can connect with me, and we can exchange, come and visit. The last thing I can mention is that, yeah, through ECOLISE, we had the opportunity. We were part of the Community for Climate program, which happened 2 years ago now, which gave us the opportunity to connect with some, yeah, really amazing people in the world of syntropic agriculture. Mark Leiber, who came to do consultancy. So yeah, we'd also like to thank ECOLISE for their work that they're doing connecting us and other syntropic farmers around the Mediterranean to do our independent research, develop models, commercial models, and agricultural models, to, yeah, create this new ecosystem of regenerative farms around the Mediterranean and, yeah, further in Europe. That's everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dara. I think it's very interesting to apply, like you're saying, this knowledge from other parts of the world and adapt them, right, to the context of the Mediterranean. And I'm very happy that ECOLISE was able to provide this entry and the support for this ecosystem to develop. This is what we're trying to do today. So if there are more questions to Dara, please either raise your hand or write them in the chat. You can also take the time to think and ask later, or ask him directly in the chat. And if you have any more links that you would like to share with us, please do so. We have a question from Sheila. If you have people close by who are on a similar path.
So there is a whole network in Hérault, so the region that we're in, Occitanie, and the department is Hérault, and there is a network of syntropic farmers. So it's something which we see growing a lot in the region also, and I feel it's something that's growing more and more right now, especially around Mediterranean, but I think further afield also. But yeah, even on the local level, we have a network of maybe 20, 30 people who are practicing syntropic agriculture.
Thank you, Dara. And with that, let's move forward to our second practitioner today, who is Matt Svarbrick from Handban Permaculture Farm in the UK. Matt is a farmer in North Wales, also an ecologist and filmmaker by background. His family and the Handban team are on a mission to prove that a small farm can produce good food, financial profit, build soil and biodiversity, build a community, and enjoy it all at the same time. I'm sure we're all super interested to see how you're doing this. And then I also want to mention something which I find impressive, and I'm sure you're going to explain to us how it is possible that through a community-supported agricultural scheme, you are feeding 80 families in your region.
Sure. Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It's really exciting to be here and be part of this, well, a bigger project, really. Like we do a lot around Europe, I guess, and a lot in the UK, but this does feel like a different bubble to us, and it does feel exciting. So thank you. Yeah, so I'm Matt, and as Anastasia said, really, I kind of 14 years ago, I got obsessed by a question, and that question is it possible to buy a small farm on a mortgage? We didn't really have any money. We met someone who was good at lending us that money and getting us a normal mortgage, but that's all we had. And to produce really good food for your community, and at the same time to build soil, to build biodiversity, to build social capital, so integral to this, to bring a community with us, and most importantly, to enjoy it. Because I think if you can do that and you can get others to do the same, I think the world becomes a radically different place. And that's what I find really exciting. So together with my partner Jenny, our children, and a small team of us, there's about 10 of us that live and work on the farm. We kind of testing that question, really. And we do lots of different things. We produce food, we train new farmers, we host lots of community events, lots of kind of similar stuff, the stuff Darrow was talking about, but maybe in a more UK, more temperate context. Yeah, and we do lots of things, and I'll tell you about them. I've not always been a farmer though. So I grew up and I was desperate to be a farmer when I was a child. But I grew up in a small terrace house, and it just wasn't something that was accessible to me. And I became an ecologist, and then I became a filmmaker, and I made programs like Planet Earth and Life and Frozen Planet, some of these big TV series. But we got to the end of those, and I realized that felt important, but it wasn't really going to change the world. And I really realized how much I love just working with ecosystems, and that if you put humans integrally, functionally inside working ecosystems, it's such a powerful space to become and be part of. And that took me down quite a deep permaculture rabbit hole. And because that's kind of, I guess, the space that permaculture feels like that. And I became quite obsessed by this saying that the only limit to a farm's productivity is the farmer's imagination. Right now, if you suddenly take on a farm from not being a farmer and try and apply permaculture all over it and create these massive integrated, amazing layered systems, it could really quickly end in tears. This is one of the first things I realized, is actually creating these systems is not necessarily so simple. And in a way, there's an element of what we were doing, which was all about stopping traveling around the world and spending my time with Jenny and building local community and having time to do that as well. And so what we got really into is a thing called holistic decision making, which I don't really have time to go into this call, but I think a process of really clearly articulating what it is you want and finding ways of achieving that is so powerful and essential. This is what the farm ends up looking like there. We're kind of on a mission to kind of break down the farm into lots of forested glades. You can call it agroforestry. It looks different in different places on the farm. So the farm's essentially half woodland, half pasture when we took it on. And what we're doing is merging those two. So lots of different systems of agroforestry that the cattle move around each day, that the chickens move into, and So we've got about 20 beef cattle. We've got about 300 laying hens. I would have 600, and that's something we're working on. But really try to create these kind of like really scruffy, super productive farming systems. And then at the heart of that, we've got a really ecologically intensive managed market garden. It's very no dig. But it brings actually quite a lot of like agroforestry into the garden as well. So it's a super biologically, ecologically life space. We've got lots of tree rows. We've got sort of uniformity, and in a way, it mirrors spreadsheets, and it means that we can move through the farm really quickly, move through the production really quickly. And I've got really obsessed by this agri-wilding. Like, how far can you push an ecosystem to produce food and things for human needs and to produce biodiversity at the same time? And we've been creating these really, don't know, really biodiverse. I think they probably do count as syntropic agroforestry systems within our woodland, and really experimenting with what crops and things go into these in the UK. And then at the heart of that, we're creating almost like a little, I think people really need positive, beautiful spaces. So creating like a little, almost like a little Hobbitland Shire with beautiful spaces at the heart of that teach all the different things we're doing and that really bring community together. We run lots of stuff for like hyper locals. There's lots of daily things where people come into the farm. There's lots of things where we run community events on a weekly basis. We've got like an arts program now and like a traditional crafts program, things like this, but still very centric to it is distributing good food. And we've created a cooperative that distributes good food locally. And then I've realized that the most important thing is actually you're only as strong as your neighbors, and is sharing. And I think there's almost a spirituality element, or definitely an element of the future, which needs us to pause and have more reverence and relationships with ecosystems. And so last year we built a stone circle, and we spent a lot of time bringing people together around fires, and almost comes back to where I started with that holistic decision making, to pause, work out what people actually want, and then work with ecosystems to deliver those things. I think so much of this is removing assumptions and going, actually, what do humans need? What do we want? How do we achieve that hand in hand with an ecosystem? That's my 5 minutes. I could talk for a long time. But I'm just really excited that you're looking into this space, because the thing we've realized at Hemban is just powerfully how possible these things actually are. And I'm a very positive person, but I genuinely think we just need to get on with creating these systems, because I know they work. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that I think we can also listen to you for a long, long time, because like you're saying, you bring so much positivity, and not just that, but the practical experience of how to actually live it and put it to work, to bring food to our tables, but also to build community and to build, which I think is the most important, a different vision for the future and for how we can interact both with the ecosystems around us and how us ourselves can act differently as part of these ecosystems. So let me just have a quick look if there are any questions. Not as far as I can see, but if anything comes up in the meanwhile, write it there, and I'm sure Matt will be happy to respond. So yeah, we're hearing all about how to make this happen in community and in various places in Europe. I want us now to direct our attention to Eastern Europe, and we have here with us Anatol Albin from Grădina Moldovei, Moldova's Garden, a dear friend. Welcome, Anatol. I will introduce you briefly, and then we can hear more about you and the work in Moldova. So Anatol has over 13 years of experience in agroecology, collecting, cultivating, and preserving seeds adapted to local conditions. In the Garden of Moldova organization, he facilitates relations with public authorities, being a lawyer, consults in the fields of policy and legislation on topics such as food autonomy and security, access to land, the right to seeds, local and international cooperation. And he has been a promoter of the peasants' rights as human rights, especially supporting the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Landless Rural Workers adopted by the UN General Assembly, namely the UNDROP. So he supported implementing this in Moldova. Welcome, Anatol, when you're ready to start sharing with us your practices.
Yes. Hi, everyone, and hi, Anastasia. First of all, thank you very much for invitation for such a nice and pleasant discussion and meeting. So, and yeah, I'm really happy to see a lot of people here sharing the same interest to the ecosystem, which we all are part. And as for Grădina Moldovei, Garden of Moldova Public Association, we are a bunch of the people, of small farmers, of the also a gardener. I wouldn't say that I'm a farmer. I'm a gardener. I'm a hobby gardener on weekend. The founder of the Grădina Moldovei is Mariana Shremet, who settled together with her husband in the village near to our capital in Chisinau, and started the farm according to the permaculture principles and promoting the agroecology. So in the meantime, in 2000, I think 10 years ago, Mariana have registered the association, having the principal purpose, creating the bank of seeds. So live seeds where all the people can contribute, could grow and to take part in this exchange and contribute to the food sovereignty in our country. So I can say we did a lot, but we are still on the way of creating or maintaining the seed bank is quite challenging issue. The model is quite common through Europe. So Mariana had brought it, having the experience, European experience, and brought it here. So it's very interesting. So we all benefit from it. Once I've been informed about that idea, I joined the Public Association in 2017, and immediately have been involved in another direction of promoting the permaculture and agroecology through the right of food. So, and since then, as Anastasia said, that we have had help our government and our representatives in UN Assembly to vote for the Declaration on Peasant Rights. So, and from that moment, most of the people, the activists, the farmers, we are the ecologists who are promoting that declaration and wanted to expand and to implement those principles and rights in our country. As for the right to food, so it's a very interesting and a deep and large topic. And as we are Bank of Seeds, the right to seed is one of the essential, one of the core part of the right to food. And I just, to present a brief situation in the Republic of Moldova is that right to food is the constitutional right, and it's okay for us. So we have this constitutional right written in our constitution and in our supreme law. But as for right to seed, our special law said that physical person or small farmers and can do whatever they want with it, but without commercializing them. So we are here, we are in the situation where the right to seeds, access to seeds, and potential to develop this and to implement the opportunities are restricted unlegitimately. And yeah, we are in the position to defend and defending those rights, in trying to explain to the authorities that this kind of limitation, it has no reason in our context. And any limitation of this right must be justified, of course, temporarily. So yeah, I think my minutes have gone. Also, just in this context, just to say some words about that, how we contribute in the region, is that last year we have successfully ended the course for paralegals on right to seeds for participants from Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia, in order to improve the capacity of the small farmers and organic farmers in the field of right to food defending. So we were doing the school for half of a year, improving the knowledge and practical abilities of our participants, of our students to defend and to advocate the right in peasants, specifically on right to seeds. So thank you. And I think in the future we will be joining you as well in discussions, and and maybe some workshops if you invite us. So we'll be happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anatol. I think you brought a very, very important perspective that the right to food must necessarily also imply the right to seeds as a way to produce that food. And I also want to bring another dimension of the UNDROP that you mentioned, which is that it also recognizes the rights of nature, right? Besides the rural population and the right to seeds, also the rights of water, land, and so on, to be protected from exploitation, pollution, and so on. So I think that's a great step forward legally and from a rights-based perspective as to how we relate to the ecosystem that we're part of, as we were saying. So thank you very much for bringing that here today. There are some comments on the chat, if you would like to give them a read. Some calls to actions as well. So in the meantime, it's time for us to move to the roundtable. Time is running quite fast today, and I would like to make the most of having you all here together. Our roundtable today is about cultivating community, namely scaling local wisdom into a regenerative European social contract. And we have here with us Sheila Darmos from Greece, the organization Southern Lights and Regenerative Farming Greece, Philip Burker from Climate Farmers, Emiliano de Tapia Perez from Manos Verdes Project, and Marta Cortegano from Terra Sintropica and Local Action Group Estime in Portugal. Welcome everyone, and I will ask Enric to help me change the view so that we can see you all. Remember that if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or also raise your hand and ask them directly. I'm struggling a bit here. Okay, I think we're all here. So welcome Sheila, Marta, and Philippe. I will start with very short introductions. You have quite impressive biographies. and I will then confirm if the fourth person is still here with us. So Sheila is a third-generation farmer and a social entrepreneur in the agri-food sector and civic engagement field in Greece. Her dedication to soil and the system restorations translate into her key aims of transforming the farming sector in Greece through her initiative Regenerative Farming Greece. This is an approach she also applies in her farm, the Southern Lights, which is also a community project and works as a non-profit, delivering trainings and public speeches in Greece. And she's also active in Europe through the creation of the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture. So Sheila, quite impressive work that you have been doing. Thank you for that. Given how you work across all these scales, right, from your own farm in Laconia to European alliances, in your experience, how do European peer-to-peer networks, regional hubs, and EU alliances ensure that regenerative agriculture isn't just a technical shift, but one that is deeply socially rooted in the local territory?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation. Yes, I would say we can't have a shift without such peer-to-peer learning networks, because if I don't have peers where I can learn from, how will I advance my farming operation? And then again, farming has such a social aspect that I think you will find barely any farmer who farms alone and who doesn't farm in collaboration with others. I mean, you need to borrow tools, you need to bring into your farm skills and knowledge from other farmers. You can't be an expert in everything. And I think it always was the case that farming was a community task. So yeah, we see that also with the networks we created in Greece, local networks in different regions. Farmers gain a lot of, they are very empowered to follow their calling and their initial suspicion that farming must work in a different way. And just by getting to know other farmers, either from their own region or from the same country, or even from other countries, it helps a lot the innovation to spread. And I think this is very, very crucial. But besides all the knowledge exchange, I think the most important thing is that you really become more confident and you have fun in doing so. I think it's not very nice to be alone and to realize what you do doesn't work and you need to find another way. But once you have a community out there that is going on the same journey and shares the same challenges, suddenly everything is not so difficult anymore. I also think on a European level, it's very crucial because we have the same challenges in parts of Greece that farmers are facing in the south of France or in Portugal. We have so many similarities. And there might be an innovation in viticulture in France that farmers here in Greece would benefit a lot. So I think also the European peer-to-peer learning networks are really, really important. Plus, they really help us amplify our voice and help us share the challenges that we have, and then also help us put pressure on the legislation to change, which a lot there has to change, because currently regenerative farming is in many, many, many cases illegal or just not possible to register in any national farming system. But I think I will leave some space for the other speakers now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ila. I'm very happy to hear your perspective, and especially that you went back to the social aspect and to the confidence and fun that this is supposed to bring, because after all, farming is about our future, right? And if we're not building it in this way, and having the support and amplifying our knowledge, then it becomes quite heavy, I would say, to do it. Our next invited speaker is Philip Burker. Welcome, Philip. He's the co-founder of Climate Farmers and the leading advocate for regenerative agriculture in Europe. His work focuses on building systems that reward farmers for ecosystem restoration, shifting the agri-food the agri-food sector from extractive practices to regenerative ones. He is also a TED Countdown speaker and an Obama leader. So, Philippe, ECOLISE also calls for recognizing and rewarding the social and environmental value of food systems. Given your experience in the Climate Farmers, which is a growing network, European network, how can we shift institutions toward paying for measurable results like soil health and biodiversity?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, first of all, good to be here and good to see how many farmers you put on the stage. Definitely very much loving that. So I have the pleasure of being in this movement for almost 10 years now. I got my own land here in Portugal in 2017. And I think it's great to see how much it has been grown since then already, right? So I think that the shift is happening is for me without a question. I've no doubt, I'm also fresh father since 2 years. And I've no doubt that by the time my boys are grown-ups, we will not talk about regenerative agriculture anymore, but this will just be agriculture because this is just what makes sense. And I always say it's just a question, how fast does this change happen? And I think there we have very big influential actors, specifically the agrochemical industry, which is going to try to slow this down as much as possible because they're benefiting from the current system. And this is also the big issue that we're seeing specifically on the policy side of things, right? Like Bayer has the largest amount of lobbyists in Brussels, and they have built a system where subsidies are given to farmers based on size of land and on productivity. So farmers optimize for that, and that will always mean that it's at the detriment of ecosystem services. But at the same time, and this is very similar to what Sheila has been saying and what we have been seeing, is this movement is led by farmers right now. And you can't change the fact that regenerative farms are just also economically more successful and are providing ecosystem services, which then increase farm resilience again. And the beauty is, when I started looking in this in 2017, I barely found any regenerative farmers. I found Richard Perkins, which Matt mentioned as well, as the only one in Europe. I reached out to Richard, and together with him, I was able to identify 60 farms across Western Europe doing this. And this was really hard in 2017 to find these 60 farms. Now, there's thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of farms. I didn't know the farms in the beginning. Like 6 years ago, I would say I know almost every regenerative farm in Europe. But now we are far, far, far beyond that. And the main way how this has been scaling is by farmers visiting other farmers and seeing firsthand how this is actually working. And a very interesting one that we have been shifting on in the beginning, reason why we called ourselves climate farmers, is because we also saw that back then already there was a voluntary carbon market. There was a topic on climate change, which was this thing. So we're like, hey, let's pay farmers for storing carbon in the soil. But now I'm not a big fan of that concept anymore. First of all, because it simplifies things way too much. Second of all, because we can't really measure carbon. And third of all, because the amount of money that you get only really makes sense in very large scale farms, minimum 100 hectares, actually more, 500, 700, 1,000. And the average farm is 16 hectares in Europe still. But we also moved beyond that by now because we see a stronger drive for people willing to pay for produce which doesn't make them sick. So we see a lot more direct farmer to consumer willingness to pay. And we see also, and this is very exciting, I think, with the events that have been happening in the past, for example, the floodings, the droughts, etc., an increased awareness also on the EU level that we need to look into water in Europe. We need to look into the issue of water scarcity and how saltwater storage capacity increase can actually fight that. Not to the level that we should be seeing it if we're looking at the damages that we're having due to it, but we see a move in the direction. We just had the Soil Health Monitoring Directive passed on the EU level. We had the Nature Restoration Law passed, which puts binding biodiversity targets on member states. So the change is slow, and agrochemical is fighting it, but it is happening. We just got appointed with climate farmers on the new EU expert committee on farmland management, which is amazing. I think it's the first time it's a region ag organization being able to directly influence policy on that level. So it's going on, and I'm curious if EARA is actually on there as well, which is doing amazing work. So it would be great to have Simon with me on the side because I'm sure agrochemical is still going to be in that expert committee. But long story short, farmers are driving the change. It is happening in that direction, and the best thing that we can do is to bring people on farms, to show them that this is happening, and also to focus on the finances. So we, as climate farmers, we're developing a few case studies now with some of the farmers in our community, where we're also going to outline that profitability of the farms increased with the transition to Regen Ag. Because this is one of the key lies that agrochemical is still spreading, is that the transition is costing money. And in reality, what we're seeing is that actually, if done well with the right consultants, you actually increase profitability from year one onwards. And in the end, farms are businesses. So this is the way how we can also transition the conventional farmers, which might not be doing it for climate change, but they will definitely be doing it in order to make sure that they can hand over their farm to the next generation. Because that's what every farmer wants to do. And going regenerative is increasing the chance of that being possible. And I think that means it will be happening by itself. It will be happening driven by farmers, and policy and corporates. They have to come along at some point, and we just have to create the pressure for them to do so.
Amazing, Philip. Philip, thank you very much for that. It was quite a lot of information to take in, but great to hear, and also great to hear that there is hope that this is happening and it coming from different sides, right? Like you're saying, the profitability of the farms, but also the impact on policy and so on. And again, the networks being created and the direct sharing of good practices, right? So thank you for that. And you also brought the topic of water scarcity to the discussion. Building on that, I would like to welcome Marta Cortegano, who is co-founder and director of Terra Syntropica and project coordinator at a local action group ESDIME in Portugal. She has over 20 years of experience in community-led development, co-design and participatory regenerative development strategies, and at the local action group ESDIME, which is also a social solidarity cooperative. She coordinates regional collective strategies for regenerative agriculture, local food systems, and climate adaptation, being that the region is a very dry, semi-arid one. I also want to mention and congratulate her for being one of the first winners of the Prima Woman Greening Food Systems Award. So congratulations on that, Marta, and thank you for being with here today. My question for you is the following. Your work bridges the gap between grassroots action and regional policy. In addressing these urgent challenges like desertification, how can collaboration between civil society and public administration ensure that the territorial governance of land, water, and biodiversity is truly inclusive?
So, hello, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. And it's also a pleasure that I can share this panel with Sheila and Philip. So I'm very glad to be here with all of you, and also inspired by the previous people of before us. So yes, actually we really are one of the most difficult places in Europe, in South Europe, in terms of desertification. We have very difficult soils. We have, in terms of rainfall, a very difficult scenario. I can say, for instance, between 2015, 2023, for instance, we had more or less 250 millimeters of water per year, what was less than what was expected for the final of the century in the worst case scenario of climate change. And we achieved it in these 9 years. Although, for instance, the previous year was very good, and this year we had more rain that in 100 years. So when we analyze the media, it will be higher than the other last 10 years tend to show. But the truth is that normally we had this problem of land abandonment. For instance, here in Metula, we are 4.8 inhabitants per square kilometer. We have the problems of the soil, so we are in the championship of the desertification, unfortunately. But probably this is also not how we can do it with this problem, but the contrary, we need to do it because we have this kind of problems. So we have to think that if we want to be in the future probably one of the main or primary refugees from climate change in Europe, or if we can do something about it and how we can do something. And actually, for some time, I was here in the region for 20 years. My parents are from the region, not from this village, but from the region. And all my family went away because of this problem that many people goes from the rural areas to the cities, because it seems a place of scarcity, and especially this very difficult place of Portugal. But I tend to look at these places. I was coming for here in the holidays, and I really look with the different glasses, and the glasses of abundance. And so at 20 years ago, a little bit more than 20 years, I came to here with my husband, Antonio. I was really wanting to develop strategies with local communities, and I developed a big process that was it was 110 projects and 90 partners about the using the wild resources like the herbs, the mushrooms, the wild fruits. And I work on that on 10 years. And then my husband was with me. We started our own organic herbs project. But after 10 years, we really understood that we were not creating the impact and the sustainability that we wanted to. And so this make me think a little bit about what I was doing wrong, and about myself in first place, and also how we as a team, we as community, we as territory. And I really start to look in the territory, who would be the other people in associations, in the schools, in local public authorities, in farmers, in local farmers associations. So what was the regional context, and who were the people that really want to collaborate and do it with a better quality of the collaboration? And that was an important point, that we also start at the same time that we start to look for technical solutions. And for instance, we start to visit with farmers other models on regenerative farming, and at the same time thinking ourselves how we could collaborate better. And one very interesting point is that we were visiting other farmers, normally more north than Mertula. And normally our farmers tend to say, yeah, very interesting case, but you see their soils. So if we had these soils, it would be easy. Or yeah, but look how much rain they have and what we have here. So it's completely impossible to do this kind of model. And there was an interesting point when we went to visit Alvelal in Spain. Because actually they were worst. That was important. They were a little worse in terms of the soils, in terms of the climate, and still there was a big partnership between public authorities, farmers association, cooperatives, farmers, entrepreneurs, and they all had a common strategy for the land. And it was very beautiful because we organized these visits, and we also take local authorities, cooperatives, the president of farmers association, other farmers, and we went together in the same car 14 hours, having to discuss with each other and to speak with each other, discuss together. And when we were arriving, they were saying, well, after all, maybe this is better than we thought, that it can be worse. So in one point, because they saw that it could be worse than it was, and also they saw that there were not only technical solutions, but the fact that collaboration can really change things. So for many, we start then a partnership between local municipalities. We change the practices. In our case, we start with syntropic farming in our own farm, but at the same time, understanding that local context for other farmers were completely different, we also start mobilizing farmers to a community of practice when we went to learn together about holistic management, keyline design, and other practices, trying to understand in each context what kind of practices could we have. But at the same time, for instance, we start with organizing with the public municipality and in every schools of Mertula to have small forest gardens in every schools when we teach all weeks. At 5 years that we are doing this in all schools of Mertula, we are going there and we give lessons not only on the part of the forest garden, but also about cooking, because we tend to close the circle. And then we start to do assemblies, local assemblies, and designing what could be a local food system in Mertula, and working with the local food canteens from the schools and trying how we can close that. And then we start also how local food hub with our own restaurant, with vegan food, although I think there was not even 5 vegans in our village, but was the idea was really to show that we can change a little bit the food system directly from the farm to the fork. What was also interesting, it was that the other municipalities around start a little bit, why Mertula is always appearing in the news, in newspaper, and why we are not doing anything. And even other farmers that actually start to say that, why, for instance, the president or vice president of Mertula are working with the farmers, and here in our territory, they are not doing anything. So it was really interesting how they start to be involved. And many of the projects that we design really involve farmers, local municipalities. They are always involved, and they can be as facilitators, but for us, it's quite important that they really go to the visits, that they really start to understand something about farming, about regenerative farming, and then they get so interested that they start to be much more facilitators in the process. So at some point, we really designed a common vision for the territory with more than 70 regional actors. There was not anymore just Mertula, but all the region of Baixo Alentejo. And the vision that was designed was the idea of living an inclusive and prosperous community that collaborate for the regeneration of the territory. And we start to see what funds could we use at the regional level that actually have nothing to do with agriculture. They can pay, it's for the fund for development, regional development, not for agriculture, but how we can use this kind of funds through our ESDIM, that is a local action group, to improve the quality of the collaboration and also to give tools, like for instance, to have communities of practice between farmers. So that's because these kind of funds, they cannot fund agriculture, but they can fund collaboration, they can fund innovation, they can fund climate adaptation. So it was a little bit how we can do it by different kind of funds. So if we cannot change so fast what is happening in Brussels, maybe we can do it at the regional level. And actually, it was beautiful because we start a lot of things with philanthropy and other kind of funds. And at the same point, the regional, that is not a regional government, because in Portugal we don't have regions, but is the regional coordination of the funds. They get to speak with us, and they said, we want to fund beautiful things as you are doing. And why is not possible for us, why we are doing this with private funds, and we would like to put our funds, the public funds, in this kind of process. And so we start to co-design a little bit what could be this kind of regional programs to be adapted to this kind of partnership that we have in the region of Baixo Alentejo. For instance, to have a regional food shed that we are not only working in Mertula, but nowadays we have, I think, for 2 years, just inspiring local authorities for they to know that it's possible, really possible, to have good local regenerative food in the canteens. But 2 years was just to convince them, to inspire them, to have training on how to do it. And now we designed the process, and we are starting to do it with many municipalities, because we already have the funds, we already have the knowledge, and we are doing that. And just to finish, other possibility also is that the fact has, we are also in ESDIM, a local action group, and local action groups, actually, they are the one that manage funds for local development. and also to farmers. And what we have done also, it was to, with everything that we learned from the farmers and to understand what were the needs that they had, we actually changed the criteria for the approval of projects for farmers in order to give preference for regenerative farmers. It was a complicated process for more or less 2 years for us to try to understand what we would like, what they need, then to negotiate with national authorities, because they even didn't know what we were talking about. Some of the terms were completely, what is that? What is regenerative farming? What is, so everything was a little bit difficult, but in the end, we really had the possibility to change also because of the fact that we can manage also this kind of fund. So it's a little bit a complex ecosystem of local action, regional action, action between different municipalities, but with this idea that we can change a lot if we change the quality of the collaboration. If we understand that we have much more power than we think, is that not everything depends on Brussels. We can do a lot. We as communities, we as people have a lot of power if we can come together.
Thank you very much, Marta. It's quite a fascinating story of how different actors come together and how it's so important to be creative and imaginative when dealing with the situations in the territory, to be able to find the best solutions, right? And then integrate them into, like you were saying, the vision for your community and for a regenerative future. And I want to say also that your anecdote with the car trip, it's quite the cautionary tale, right? So having access physically to a cautionary tale like you had with your trip to Junquera, when also La Junquera, and also finding solutions together, like being stuck together literally, it was a good way of, I think, explaining how we all feel, or most of us feel, in certain challenging situation, environmentally wise. So thank you for that. I have a composite question now for both Sheila and Philippe, because Philippe mentioned that obviously the idea of using a regenerative farming is also to conserve the farms so that they can be passed on to the new generations, right? And I know that Sheila also works with youth and with young farmers. So I wanted to ask you, looking towards the future and at rural regenerations, how can seeing farmers and peasants recognizing them as stewards of our collective future, rather than just providers of food as commodity or environmental services, how can this support rural youth and rural regeneration, renewal, generational renewal of rural communities?
Shall I, Philip, or you want to go?
Please go first.
Yeah, so I think it's really, really crucial the way a community sees a community member and how much actually it does influence people's choices for a job or for anything. But we do see a lot of very dedicated and passionate people who are now turning towards regenerative agriculture, who have the characteristic that they don't really care what the rest of the communities, local community thinks. So this is one very interesting aspect. And I think then it's also really, really important to not forget that the market and where we sell the products is just very crucial. Like, I think we don't speak enough about it, like the retailer or the buyers or whoever they are of the products of the farms do need to recognize the work and the contribution that those farmers are making towards making our communities and our ecosystems healthier. And this needs to translate in good prices, fair prices, instead of, I don't know, always looking for the cheapest. So I think there still needs to happen a lot of change, and actually for this appreciation to translate also into action, because otherwise, we will lack. I don't know. Otherwise, we will need to wait for subventions for regenerative agriculture or other mechanisms to support those farmers financially. But this might still take quite a long time. But I think through the market, we have a very direct access and tools as well. And I think it's currently still a bit overlooked. I'm curious what you have to say, Philipp, about this.
I'm going to take a completely different angle. I think what I find is exciting is what I always used to say is we need to make farming sexy again. And I mean, we have a massive issue with the next generation of farmers, right? Like average age of farmers is 56 in Europe. But what I think is really cool is that regenerative farming is making farming sexy again. Like this is exactly what's happening right now. We see a lot of young people following us, for example, on social media. I have a lot of young people coming to me when I speak at events like Change Now or so. Change Now is the biggest climate conference in Europe, and regenerative agriculture is growing more and more every year. And it's a big part of what's happening there. And the average age of people coming there is in the early 20s. And to test this, we did last year, for the first time, we launched a region agronomy training where Sheila is one of our training farms. And we had 56 young people apply and saying, hey, they would love to spend 3,000 euros to spend 6 months learning regenerative agriculture on regenerative farms. I think that's amazing. And I think that shows that there's a really big drive of people wanting to go in that direction. And of course, you cannot start a 50-hectare farm. You cannot start a 100-hectare farm because it's very hard to buy the farmland. But for example, market gardening is something that can very much be done by young people in a city context and in a city environment. Next to that, of course, we have the whole issue of the rural landscape having a complete lack of infrastructure right now. Like, for example, for myself, where my land is, there's no school in an area of 45 minutes driving, which makes it really hard to raise a family there, right? And young people still want to go out, they still want to have gastronomy, they still maybe want to have the occasional nightclub. And all of this is an issue. But we do see a whole regenerative village movement where I'm also part of, where young people are grouping together to buy land and to start communities on the countryside. And I also think that in times of AI and everything being more tech and etc., there will be a counter movement. And I think that counter movement of people wanting to go back to the land is going to be an exciting one. Also because farmland is still relatively cheap if you compare it with an apartment in Lisbon or in Amsterdam or in Berlin. We bought an entire village with 7 hectares of land for the price that a 30 square meter apartment in Lisbon costs right now. And I think this will also be put in that direction. But what we need to provide is education for that. And I think this is one of the big issues. And that's also why we start talking to universities right now, because at the moment, there's no path for young people that want to go into regenerative agriculture to learn that. There's more than 200 agricultural master degrees. None of them are in regenerative agriculture. Some of them mention agroecology, but none of them go practically into preparing them for what a regenerative farmer needs to do, which is also a lot of it is, of course, context specific, but you need to have the mindset and the learning of really working with your local environment and working with nature in the way how you're doing farming. And I think if we start doing that, and I loved what Marta was saying, ideally even start earlier with having people in schools, having access to farmland, having access to trees, knowing where their food is coming from. And then we will also see a generation coming up that thinks that farming is cool again. And that is the world that I want to be in, where it's cool to be a farmer and where people grow up saying, hey, I want to be a farmer in the future. And I think if we manage to do that, then we also have a thriving future ahead of us.
Thank you very much, both. I'm not sure, Marta, if you have anything to add, maybe also to this. About how do you see the next generation or the rural renewal in your region with your experience?
Well, I think it was the thing that really was helpful for me when I came to Mertula was to understand that the main thing that all young people from here want was to fastly go away. That was really hurtful to see. And so being in a region that almost of the people are age And that was something that we are always thinking about. And then we start to understand that more than creating strategies on how people came, that if we have a very dynamic space where a lot of things with a lot of happiness is happening, people probably will pass here. And they don't need to have a contract to stay here. If we can have this space where people want to pass by and learn and be inspired, this is also quite interesting. Saying that, actually we have some interesting projects about how we can turn rural places, and especially very difficult rural places like where we are, more attractive. For instance, the fact that the problem is not only a problem of getting land, for instance, but you really have to know, to have knowledge on how to farm. And when you are going to these kind of methods, organic, regenerative, agroecology, you need plus knowledge not to fail. But there is other factors, that is also your integration on the place. And many people came and have a lot of dreams, very beautiful dreams, but they want they really put a very strong emphasis on their own vision of the rural area. And then it is very difficult for them to be integrated in these spaces. So what we are also doing, and we are starting also a big process that is a rural entrepreneurship academy, and other projects that we had already made here with people coming from other places, that they can learn, they can test, they are able to fail and just to say, okay, after all, I don't want to be a farmer, and that's okay. They have integration and help to integrate in the community. And we have done these tests with people from all around the world that want to be a farmer and want to be in a rural area, but also, for instance, with refugees from Afghanistan. That was also a beautiful thing to understand that unfortunately, there is people in many places of the world that need a secure space, and there is a lot of land abandonments and places in Europe that are quite secure, as Portugal, that is a very secure country, and have a lot of land abandonments and aging, and that we need people. So we have a lot of strategies about that, and saying also that we have also these possibilities of people that have big land that actually could share land with people that were coming from other places. That was actually what happened to me and my husband, because our farm, it's not our land. So it's a partnership with the archaeological research field of Mertula. They had an abandoned farm, and we are using and have a contract first for 10 years and now for more 20 years. So the idea of creating new government models on how to use the land, but also about the part of knowledge and capacity building in very different models, and then how to integrate in the community, because many times it fails, not because I don't have land, not because I don't have knowledge, but because it's very difficult to be integrated in a new rural community. So we try to tackle all of this.
Lovely, Marta. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think the idea that you brought, that while we have on the one hand land which is being abandoned, and then aging rural population, and at the same time people across Europe and the world in need of a safe space and a safe place, and also good food, right? Which is a basic need for survival. It's something that can very much open our view on how we can integrate various aspects of this, right? The social and ecological regeneration, and find these complex solutions and new governance models to have a complex solution to complex problems, basically. Thank you very much, all, for sharing your ideas. I saw that you've shared some of your contacts to keep in touch with the other participants. Please do that if you feel it is making sense. right before we go, or actually right before the final moment, I would like to share the Right to Food ECI links so that you can have them at hand for after the event and that you can sign them. You will need to have your ID as well. And yes, feel free to share them in your networks. DCI needs 1 million signatures by the end of the year to become a topic which is discussed in the European Commission and the European Council. So if you believe that food should be a right for all, a human right in Europe, please look at this ECI and sign it when you have the chance. You have the links there. And to close this session, we've already Matt and Anatol already had to leave, but I would like to ask you three and our participants as well, if you would like to leave us with a seed for future collective action. This is our fourth event in the series, Communities for Future, Good Food for All, closing the series of events within the Communities for Local Green Deals project. And I wanted to ask you, in just one word or a short motto, what is the one thing we must carry forward to ensure a truly regenerative and just food future? For the participants, maybe in chat, but if you want to go on and say it out loud, I think that would be great as well.
I can start. I think it's to reconnect with your farmers and your community that is hosting you.
Yeah, very, very close to what I would say. I almost always close my talk with pay attention to where your food comes from. And I find it so amazing how even in the region space, like every time I go to the supermarket, I feel bad. And I think we should, because we shouldn't buy our food at the supermarket, even if it's convenient. So we should really pay attention to buy your food directly from a farmer, make the extra effort, make sure the money arrives where it should arrive, and make sure you pay attention to how you source it. And then cook delicious meals with it to other people and tell them where you sourced your food. Because I do think that through amazing food and good meals, word still spreads the best.
So I will just add, everybody don't have afraid to just act and the afraid of the error. So we will fail. I had failed a lot of times in all these projects, but then just fail better and continue.
Thank you very much. I want to read some of the mottos and words shared with us on the chat. Maria Bastos wrote education. Maria Hetman wrote each other, communities and people are at the center. Vishnya wrote justice. Roxana wrote taking responsibility for your own role and power. Ruth Marie wrote, we are powerful and fragile, we succeed and we fail. Learn to embrace the imperfect and grow together. Dara wrote, connect with nature around you. So I think we are pretty much all in alignment, although maybe coming with slightly different perspectives. And I hope that we can keep this present in our mind, what we just shared now, to motivate us for collective action in the future. And very importantly, also what Matt also brought, and some of you as well, which is to do this together with joy, so that we are stronger and we have this safety nets when we fail. When we fail better, I think we fail better together, if I can paraphrase what Marta said. So I think that's definitely the way to move forward. So thank you again to everyone being present here today. I would also like to congratulate my colleague Hestia for finishing her PhD thesis on land grabbing from an environmental justice and ecofeminist perspective. I think it will give us great joy and help us to understand better when we get the chance to read it. I would also like to thank my former colleague Laurence for being here, our current council member Ruth Marie for attending, and all our practice sharers, Matt, Dara, and Anatol, Sheila, Philippe, and Marta for sharing their super inspiring insights. I do hope we get to see each other again and work together for a just and sustainable food system in Europe and beyond. I do hope we manage to get food to be a human right in Europe again and beyond. And I think that in order to do this, we need to recognize it is our collective and political responsibility to work towards this with every sidestep or challenge that might come on the way. With that said, I want to thank you all very much for being here. If you have any questions, please contact us at the ECOLISE email addresses or through social media. We will be sharing some ways to be connected, to stay connected with the Communities for Local Green Deals project as well. And that is all from my side. Thank you. I hope to see you again.
Amazing. Thanks so much for organizing. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.